you saying, me chavers? Hope you all had a good Christmas and didn't get too wasted. But if you did, then all is forgiven for now. So we're back today with what may be the most loaded question of all time. Does consciousness continue after death? So, the TLDR version of this for me is yes. I'd say it does, to be honest, based upon my life experiences, my experiences with psychedelics, mystical states, generally just putting the pieces together in terms of reality and analysing the complex, deep nature of life, consciousness, the universe, in what appears to be infinite complexity. Personally, for me, I feel like reality is infinite and consciousness is infinite, so I don't really see how I could believe that that life doesn't continue after death, because something infinite doesn't just stop, does it? It's infinite, it just goes on forever and ever and ever. There's no beginning or end, it's just isness. All that ends is the physical body, this life. You just forget and you begin again, begin a new life. So that's always made sense to me, but I didn't always used to think that. I definitely used to be an atheist. I'll get into my thoughts on God in a later video, because I feel like that's a separate matter. Obviously it ties in with life after death, but this is already a very loaded video, so we'll cover that in a future one. This is like the third episode in sort of the philosophy series that I'm doing. I've made a playlist on it. The two other videos I did was that role of suffering in life and is reality a simulation. I hope you enjoyed those, because it definitely ties in with all the psychedelic content. I mean, if it isn't clear enough, I like to focus on psychedelics that produce mystical states. I like to vary it up and just do regular experiences or nightmare experiences, because they all have value. Even the most regular, just normal, possibly uninteresting experience has value, because they all tie in together in some way. But the meat and potatoes of the channel is definitely the mystical experiences that one can have. Experiences of interconnectivity, unity, God, oneness, non-duality, sort of Buddhist states like no self, and how these all tie in. And if you've been listening avidly over the past however long I've been doing this, it's been like 2 years now, Jesus. So a lot of them do tie into each other. There's quite an awe-inspiring amount of consistency between these mystical states, feeling like one is God. There's an illusion of separation between myself and all of you, and just you when you see another person. It feels like it's just one consciousness, one infinite consciousness experience itself subjectively. I mean, we've all heard that phrase, like, you are the universe experiencing itself, and there is a lot of credence to this. Obviously, for me, I believe that the physical realm of physicality is second order to consciousness. I feel like consciousness isn't generated by the brain, but the brain is a vessel for consciousness to act through and to limit itself into a physical state. So if you extrapolate that idea, when you die, when your body dies, why would consciousness fade with it? Obviously, if you subscribe to, say, materialism, you would say, yes, it does, because the brain produces consciousness. And you know what, that's fair enough at the end of the day. I don't dismiss anyone's opinions on this stuff. This is the deepest question, possibly the deepest question of all time. Is death the end? And no matter what you think, everyone's entitled to their own perspective. Everyone's had different life experiences and circumstances in their life that make them believe that. I mean, I used to believe that at one point. I was like, if you're dead, lad, that shit, mate. You're just getting chewed down by worms. But now I just feel like, after all my life experiences, my ego deaths, and just generally looking at life and religion and how profound of a question this is, how profoundly complex and infinite reality is, I can't really subscribe to that idea that, oh yeah, once you're dead. Reality is just far too complex and infinite for it to just end with the body. Also, you have hundreds and millions and how many accounts throughout history of people saying, even in my video I did on the Greek, did the Greeks take psychedelics when in the Eleusinian Mysteries? They're taking the Kykeon, and literally like more or less all the big names, Socrates and Plato and etc., when they went there and confronted death in these rituals, they all completely conquered the fear of it. They had absolutely no fear of it, of cessation of consciousness. They just realised, all right, this is just one of infinite lives that consciousness experiences, and we are all one in some sense. And that's possibly why they were unbelievably advanced and intelligent for their time, because they'd gone beyond the physical human realm and seen what lies beyond. But it's important not to get dogmatic about this. I would never be dogmatic about it. At the end of the day, if you've not experienced sort of like an infinite mystical state, or you're not just like straight up religious or whatever, you're probably not going to believe this. And if you're a scientist or quite a logical person, you're probably just going to think, oh, life's it, you just get the one life, YOLO, bruv. But that's completely fair enough, because at the end of the day, if you've not had a direct mystical experience, you probably won't believe it. And yeah, it doesn't matter, it's all valid, isn't it? I'm not going to say, well, I can prove it using this, this and this. I'm not saying I can prove it, but for me, I've proved it to myself, if you get what I mean. And a lot of people would be, I know this might trigger some people, like, well, if you've proved it to yourself, then there must be like physical proof. It's like, nah, for me, I feel like the only way to truly understand this matter is to have a direct experience of, say, like death. I've genuinely felt like in multiple states where like my body has died and consciousness has gone on, and it just becomes some like infinite dream world where you can create anything you want using infinite imagination, infinite intelligence. And then there's other states of like no self, where that could be another case for what happens after death, just like complete peace, resting for an infinite amount of time, and then beginning it all over again. Possibly your next life is an amalgamation of all the karma you've accrued in this life, and say not karma in like the woo-woo sense, if you want to call it that, but say literally the energy you've collected over your life through positivity and the effects you've had on others, and what sort of life you've led. Have you wasted it? Have you misused it? Have you caused a lot of suffering? Have you caused great happiness to people and yourself? Have you been satisfied with it? And if not, say if you had an unsatisfactory life, maybe in the next life that energy coalesces, and the next life is where you realise the lessons you didn't understand in this one. It almost feels like reality, and life is just an infinite playground, an infinite sandbox game for consciousness to realise things about itself, understand itself deeper, and learn forever, basically. Because if it's infinite, it's never going to stop, is it? It's not just going to be like, right, Infinity's decided to pack it up now, lads. It's just going to keep going on and on and on, because it wants to understand and love itself deeper. And yeah, love is possibly we're going to get into like the deep metaphysical nature of love in a future video, but obviously at the end of the day, if infinity, what's better for infinity to do than just love itself infinitely in every possible way? Obviously a lot of people will be like, stop right there, criminal scum, and say, oh, what is evil then, mate? And then yeah, I think don't want to cover that in this, because we're already getting pretty deep, bruh. So in a future video, I'll talk about what evil is, and I already have my theories on what it is. Very briefly, I'll just say it's a extremely condensed, toxic form of love. I know that can be quite disturbing to think about, but actually, if you have had a mystical state and experience like the truth of infinity, if you want to call it, and why it would do that to itself, why it would experience evil and allow it to exist, it actually is very profound and makes a lot of sense why it exists. And also just in general, just from thinking in like common sense terms of how can you have deep love without the shadow to overcome it? How can love have that profundity and depth to it if it can't persevere through the darkness? And even on just a sort of shallow level, I don't mean that as in it lacks depth, I just mean in sort of a very basic way of believing in life after death, is just it seems pretty sad to think that this is just all there is, when there's just so much in your life that it just, look at how deep and insane your life is, like how much mad shit's happened in it. It just feels pretty reductionist to think, oh yeah, at the end of it, that's just it, it's just blackness, isn't it? And it's like, at the end of the day, how can it just be blackness? Because that implies there has to be some perception of the blackness to exist, which would mean there has to be some sense of consciousness. It's like, oh well, no, it just goes. It's like, mate, I just find that it seems harder to believe than believing that there is something after death. That's what I always used to think. Like, even when I was younger, I used to think, oh yeah, well, there definitely is nothing, isn't there? And then I just have to deconstruct that idea, like, well, what is nothing? And then the more psychedelic experience I had, I was like, oh wait, does nothing equal something? Do they both just balance out each other? Is reality, is the ground of reality actually nothing? Is it groundless? Is it just, because that would imply that it is infinite, it is everything. Sorry if I'm losing you here, because we're going on some serious tangents now. We're all interlinks, because the question of is there life after death, it correlates to so many other philosophical questions that we've had throughout the years, and what can be seen on psychedelics. And yeah, I understand why people would be skeptical of this, because again, we live in a scientific era, don't we? And we have done for a very long time. We value physical evidence over wishy-washy speculation, in a sense. But there's a different level of evidence. There's direct experiential evidence that you can have through mystical states, psychedelic states, even sober heightened states, even just going in like a fucking float pod or something, or staring at the wall for like 24 hours straight. I feel like there's so many anecdotal pieces of evidence where people say, oh yeah, I literally stared at a wall for 24/7 and became the wall, completely rid myself of my ego, and had a no self experience of oneness and non-duality, and sort of realizing God and what God is. And yeah, even just in my first ego death experience, the first thing I literally thought was, holy shit, this is God, this is infinity, this is oneness, this is everything. And literally before that moment, I was a complete atheist and had no idea, like, I was completely set on the fact that, oh nah, that's it, when I get to 90 years old and fucking pack it in, I'll be gone and there's nothing left. But again, how can there be nothing when that would imply that where would the consciousness go? There is a lot of rebuttal to this, and whatever you believe, that's fair enough, and I would never judge that, because everyone's on their own path. I think everyone's on their own path to understanding this, understanding God, understanding the self, understanding reality and what it is, and each nodal point of consciousness is understanding it in its own unique, relative, subjective manner. So that's why I think personally, even if you don't believe in life after death, there will be a point where you have to face it, whether it literally be on your deathbed or through some heightened state. But yeah, right now I'd say it's fair enough if you don't believe it, and even if there's not, well, what we're gonna do about it at the end of the day? I'm not gonna fucking complain, because I won't be here. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little video on possibly the most existential topic of all time. If you enjoyed it, please let me know, and what are your thoughts on life after death and consciousness, and whether it ends, does it continue, and then, to be fair, not mentioned reincarnation. Obviously, so many religions and spiritual practices have talked about reincarnation, about the unification, and then about how one of the deepest aspects of the universe is this unification and disconnecting process, like coming apart and coming back together, as above so below. You see this even in the stars, like a star forms and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and all this energy, and then it collapses in on itself. Civilizations throughout, like say Rome, with the Roman Empire, it builds up, and then it falls, allowing for something else to come. And then literally in your own life, you can see it happening through, say, your relationships, literally anything you're interested in, say anything that affects your life really has like this rising and falling aspect. And then for you, as you're in your own personal journey of life, you rise, you're born, and then you fall when you die. And then if you again extrapolate that idea, you would just come back again, wouldn't you? So that's when you just think of it sort of logically in that sense, reincarnation makes a lot of sense. But then there's obviously how does the process of reincarnation work? Like I said before, I think it's some form of well, in the end, if consciousness is infinite, you could just imagine whatever you wanted. Possibly you could go on the other idea that I said, where it's like, oh, your karmic energy then produces your next life, for you to understand yourself deeper. But then if it's infinite, I mean, if it truly is infinite, if you died, you literally could just come back as your first life again. What's actually stopping you? If consciousness is infinite, then nothing is limiting it, really, is it? Because if it was limited, it wouldn't be infinite. And then I guess some people would be saying, oh, well, if it's infinite, then why am I experiencing finity right now, finitude? But if consciousness is infinite, it wants to experience everything. It would allow itself to have a finite experience, wouldn't it? Because what else is there to do than experience? So yeah, that was a pretty serious episode. So if you'd enjoyed it, let me know. I've literally just said that before, but here we go again. Let me know what your thoughts are on this very intense matter. And I hope you all had a good Christmas, even though I again said that at the beginning of the video, but we just got to keep reiterating it because you know the score. And have a happy new year. There'll be lots of new videos coming soon. A lot more variation and interlinking of topics, not just trip reports. Say I want to do a video on connecting all the dots between trip reports and the consistency between them, which will also tie in what I said here, because but I just want to do it in more, say, in a logical, more rational sense, get all the actual anecdotal evidence and make these pinpoint points to point them together and make it sort of like make it so we can fit the puzzle pieces together and understand things a lot deeper. But now I'm rambling, so yeah, we'll see you later, guys.